Hi, welcome to today's training. We're going to be discussing behavioral interviews and questions. We're going to learn how to construct behavioral questions for interviews that you might conduct with future applicants. By the end of the training, you should be able to define behavioral interviews, be able to write interview questions, identify examples of behavioral questions, and state the benefits of a behavioral interview. So diving right in, we're going to define what a behavioral interview / question is. A behavioral interview is one that asks the applicant about their past behavior. Usually it's related to their job performance. The intention of this is to determine whether this person is going to be able to perform the tasks of the job that they're applying to. Basically, the employer wants to use these questions to see if someone is right for the job. On this slide, we can see there are some examples of behavior questions. For example, we have here, tell me about a time when you made sure a customer was pleased with your service. And a second one, describe a time when you had to interact with a difficult client. What was the situation and how did you handle it? Now again, these questions are going to draw on past behavior of the applicant. The aim is to know what the applicant has done in the past, not what they would do, but what they've already done. I've also included some examples here of questions that are not behavioral interview questions. So these examples are, if you had to manage multiple deadlines, how would you prioritize your tasks? Imagine you manage an interdisciplinary team. How would you help the team to be cohesive? These are perfectly good examples that you might ask a candidate while you're conducting an interview. However, they are not behavioral interview questions because they're not describing what the applicant has actually done. Rather, they're more hypothetical and saying, well, if you were in this situation, what would you do? So that makes them not behavioral questions. But again, perfectly fine to use in an interview, just not a behavioral question. So what makes up a behavioral question? What makes it different from other questions that you might ask during an interview? You probably already noticed the differences in the questions that were on the previous slide. One of the things that you might see a lot with behavioral questions are what I have listed here. Describe a time you ... Behavioral questions, as I mentioned before, ask about the past. So you might say, describe a time when you used a computer database to organize customer information. Other openers that you might see are, tell me about a time when you, or give me an example of a time that you ... You might notice that these example questions are not really questions. There's no question mark in these. These are more statements. But what's important to note is that behavioral questions are going to help us get information about the applicant's past behavior. Why should we ask behavioral questions during interviews? Behavioral questions are very important to whatever interview that you may be conducting. If you want to know about that person's experience when dealing with certain situations, these are the best kinds of questions to ask because their answers can help you extrapolate and make an educated guess about how they may perform in their new position. For example, if a person was successful in meeting multiple deadlines at their previous job and they can explain that to you, there's a great chance that they're going to behave similarly in the new position. Those things combined with their resume and the other information that you might get during the interview can give you a pretty good idea of what that person is like and how they're going to do the job. So now we're going to do just a quick quiz over what we've talked about so far. Take a moment, write these answers down on your handout, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to write out your answers to these, and then we're going to go over the answers. So the first one, behavioral interviews ask about blank behavior. True or false? Saying, tell me about a time when you is a typical format for behavioral questions. An applicant's past behavior can help predict blank. True or false? Interviews cannot contain both behavioral and hypothetical questions. All right, we'll go over the answers now. Number 1, past. Remember, behavior interviews ask about the past behavior. Is this true or false? It's true. A lot of times you're going to see tell me about a time when you're writing or you're reading behavioral questions. And again, the applicant's past behavior can help predict their future behavior. And finally, the last one, it's false. You can have an interview that has both behavior and hypothetical questions. Thank you for your time here. We're going to move into the next part of our training. I'll have you take a little break to kind of regroup, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes.